everybody, we're at 96 National Historic Site in 96, South Carolina. We came to see the Star Fort. Are you ready, Mom?
Yes.
I am too, so let's go. And we're getting into 96, South Carolina. And Mom really likes that building over there for some reason. Said it's interesting. Over there myself. I think it was pretty. So this is what we came to see, the 96 National Historic Site.
Arrived.
Very loud. This says 96 National Historic Site, a Revolutionary War landmark. This says, why is it called 96? A colonial backcountry settlement. The origin of 96's unusual numeric name remains a mystery. There are many theories. One plausible explanation is that the English traders who passed through here in the 1700s estimated that this location to be 96 miles from the Cherokee village of Keowee to the northwest near present-day Clemson. And it says the first known historical reference to 96 is on a map of 1730 created by George Hunter, Surveyor General of South Carolina. Long before the Europeans arrived in the 1700s, as early as 9000 BC, bands of hunter-gatherers roamed here. The heavily forested land changed with time as did the native groups who began to clear fields for farming, weave cloth from natural fibers, and fashion pottery from the area's red clay soil. Of the many Indian groups who inhabited the backcountry near 96, it was the Cherokee who predominated and used this area as their hunting grounds. Positioned at the crossroads of several critical trade routes that linked Cherokee territory to the city of Charleston on the coast, 96 became a seat of power in the British colony of South Carolina. The town offered settlers a safe haven, fertile fields, and ample wildlife. Captain George Chicken of the Colonial militia recorded that he killed a buffalo when camping here with his men in 1716. Steady population growth around the 96 eventually led to hostilities between European settlers and Indians. A fort built on this site withstood 2 Indian attacks in 1760. You can really hear those cicadas. I said you can really hear those cicadas. It's kind of exciting. And this says 96 in the American Revolution, the war in the southern colonies. 96 played a significant role in the struggle for American independence from British rule. It was the site of the first Southern land battle of the Revolutionary War in 1775 and the scene of the longest field siege in 1781. Early in the war, the British focused on conquering the North. However, they turned their gaze to the South after suffering setbacks in New York, New Jersey, and Philadelphia. And this one says the siege of 96 in 1781. In November 1775, just months after America and British troops traded musket fire at Lexington and Concord, Massachusetts, the first Southern land battle of the Revolutionary War was fought here in 96. Later in 1781, the longest field siege of that war, 28 days, took place at 96. After an unsuccessful final assault by the Patriots, American forces withdrew. 1 month later, the British abandoned 96, laying the fort and town to ruin. The site of the siege of 1781 offers a unique opportunity to see Revolutionary War earthworks and understand how warfare was waged in the 1700s. The story of the siege also offers insight to the strategies used by commanders of the opposing armies. Lieutenant Colonel John Harris Cruger of the British Army and Major General Nathaniel Greene of the American Continental Army. So the bathrooms here are in that building, and the visitor center is over here in this building. They got the passport stamp there if you do the national park stuff. And I think that we will get a brochure so we'll know where we need to go. It says this was used in Battle of Star Fort, June 1781, and erected by Star Fort chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution, 1954, in November. It says, walking tour of the park. Follow the paved path to explore a colonial roadbed, Revolutionary War siege works, and the original Star Fort, the site of the early town of 96, the reconstructed stockade fort on 1781, and the Logan log house. The 1 mile walk starts out in sparse woods and meanders through fields. There is a steep incline between the old town site and the stockade fort, which may be a challenge for some people. We shall see. If it is, we'll turn back around. All right. So for those of y'all that like the nature sounds, y'all getting it today with the natural sounds of the cicadas. And I think this year, both of them's out. And that's the first time that's happened in, over 100 years? Mm-hmm. Whenever they both emerge at the same time, the species or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. Something or another. Them bugs are singing. Yeah, they're loud. Was not expecting that, but appreciate the effort. This is pretty. I love some greenery. It says environmental change from forest to park. Once a dense forest, this area was gradually cleared by people. Firestorms and the introduction of non-native plants and animal species also contributed to change in the landscape. If you lived here in the 1700s, you would have seen these woods give way to farmland. By the time the Patriot troops arrived to camp nearby in 1781, there were open fields dotted only by tree stumps. Loyalists in the town, hoping to keep the approaching enemy in view and deny them cover in the woods, had cut down trees for up to a mile in each direction. Oh my gosh, look at the snail. There's a snail. You don't see that every day on Sunday, and it is Sunday. That is so cool. Anyway, getting back to the story, just in case y'all saw that snail before I did. It says pre-settlement. This region is home to many American Indian groups, including the Saludas, Wateries, and Congarees, who hunt nearby. You got plants, dense forests of oak, hickory, elm, locust, and poplar. The animals are the white-tailed deer, turkey, squirrel, rabbit, fox, raccoon, beaver, muskrat, bison, quail, wolves, and panthers. In the 1730s to the 1750s, the Cherokee predominate, but white traders, hunters, and trappers come into the area from Charleston. Early settlers include English, Irish, Scotch, Irish, French Huguenots, and Germans. Hostilities erupt between the Cherokee and white settlers. Plants are less dense, area burned and cleared for farming, wheat, corn, indigo, and flax. Fields are used for grazing, and the animals were ample wildlife, including deer, rabbit, squirrel, fox, small farm support, cattle, hogs, and sheep. In the 1780s, 96 is occupied by loyalist troops. All land in and around the town is cleared. The town is burned and abandoned in 1781. The plants were Indian corn, oats, hemp, cotton, flax, and indigo are planted in fields outside the town. Clusters of hickory, oak, and black walnut trees grow beyond the settlement, and the animals were farm animals, graze in pastures. Hunting grounds are sparse and more remote. From the 1850s to the 1960s, the land around 96 is used for agriculture until the 1960s, when Greenwood County creates a historic site at 96. The plants were cotton is the dominant crop, and the animals were farm animals, graze in pastures, and wooded areas are occupied by deer, raccoon, rabbit, and squirrel. And from the 1970s to the present, extensive archaeological excavations of the battlefields are undertaken in the 1970s. The site becomes a national park in 1976. Native plants and animals are protected. There is a second growth of forest where land has been cleared in 1780. You got the plants is the winged elm, black walnut, pine, red maple, red bud, poison ivy, and Virginia creeper. And the animals that you would see today are deer, raccoon, rabbit, and squirrel. And snails, obviously.
And the other bugs.
Yeah. So this is historic Spring Branch, and it says Spring Branch. This stream, free flowing in 1781, was the loyalist source of water during the siege. So we do have a walking tour of the park on that map I got. Pretty sure back then though they wouldn't have this nice fancy bridge. It's pretty. And it's already starting to get steep because you can feel it in your legs already. Or I can. There's definitely a elevation change. They need a bench right here. It says this is trader with pack horse. Roads and paths allowed trade between the Cherokee and early traders. In 1753, Robert Goody set up the first permanent trading post at Old 96. Many road traces can still be seen today. So I think we're getting near the fort, because you can see stuff back there. And it looks like maybe a trench right there. So instead of a trench, that was a road. It says Island Ford Road, a colonial route to the backcountry. The earliest roads in 96 were Indian trails used for travel by foot and horse and for hunting. White settlers followed these trails to explore the countryside, trade, and eventually to settle. As the stream of settlers into the region increased, better roads were required to transport supplies safely and easily. The historic roadbed before you, the Island Ford Road, was an important traveler's route from places east and north of 96. Years of heavy usage and erosion caused the road's sunken appearance. A ferry was established at Island Ford, a shallow crossing of the Saluda River, as early as 1775. Travelers would cross there and take the Island Ford Road about 10 miles southwest directly to 96. Revolutionary War loyalists and Patriot troops used this route to transport supplies to 96. Imagine how this road would have appeared to colonial inhabitants. Wagons and carts pulled by horses or oxen were piled high with sacks of flour, bolts of cloth, and kegs of gunpowder. They clattered by on the unpaved surface. The uneven road was probably mired in mud or swirling in dust, depending on the season. It was often perilous, as cart wheels could give way or become struck, causing passengers to fall and valuable loads to slip. And that is the map key right there of where the different roads were. Probably been pretty to ride down during this day, because I mean it's still nice. Get a covered wagon and go for it. Okay, this is May 21st through 22nd, 1781. The Patriot force arrives. After a series of disastrous defeats in South Carolina, George Washington, head of the Continental Army, took action. He named General Nathaniel Greene to command Patriot forces in the South in December 1780. Greene drove into the backcountry hoping to take key Loyalist strongholds like 96. By May 22nd, 1781, Greene's troops descended on these grounds from the Island Ford Road in the rainy darkness. Soaked to the skin by heavy spring rain, they toted heavy artillery, supplies, and tools. The troops consisted of Continental Army soldiers from Maryland, Delaware, and Virginia, and North Carolina militia. This force of almost 1,000 split and fanned out around the town, converging on it from two directions to seal off access to water, food, and reinforcements. But Lieutenant Colonel John Harris Kruger, the Loyalist commander garrisoned at 96, had expected Greene's arrival and prepared well. His defenses were strong. The arriving Patriots would have seen a town fortified with a strong stockade, blockhouses, and bastions, as well as earth forts to protect the town's water supply. A large star-shaped fort defended the north side of town near the Island Ford Road. As Greene's tired men set about establishing a camp near here, on May 22nd, the commander pondered his options. He had inadequate artillery and no promise of reinforcements. On the advice of his chief engineer, he decided to launch a siege against the heart of the Loyalist defense, the Star Fort. So they would have been coming down that road right there, the Island Ford Road, in this direction. And that's how it would have looked with them heading down that way. And that right there is also the road, so they obviously built this little platform here over the years, but they would have came right through here. So this says, help preserve the past. Please keep off fragile earthworks. So they do have an observation tower here, so I'm guessing maybe we can go up there and see the fort from there. I guess I shall take myself up there. So this says May 22nd through June 18th, 1781. The Patriots lay siege to the Star Fort. Our success is very doubtful. And that was by General Nathaniel Greene, May 23rd, 1781. General Greene entrusted Colonel Thaddeus Kazoku, I know I didn't say that right, with the task of creating siege works, a system of trenches that would allow his men to approach and capture the Star Fort. The Continental Army engineer, a 35-year-old native of Poland, had received his military education in Warsaw and Paris. The Revolutionary War trench lines before you provide a picture of how Kazoku conducted the siege against the Star Fort according to traditional rules of warfare in the 1700s. A series of parallels or earthen trenches were dug, providing cover for troops and allowing them to move artillery close to their target. Angled approach trenches connecting the parallels, forming a Z pattern leading up to the fort. The trenches you see here are partially reconstructed. Archaeological investigations reveal their original locations, but they have not been fully excavated. The Star Fort posed a formidable challenge to Greene's troops. Its 8-point design allowed soldiers inside to direct their gaze and their guns in many angles and over a wide area. Standing here in 1781, you would have noticed a wide ditch encircling the perimeter of the fort and glimpsed dirt walls thick enough, perhaps 10 to 15 feet wide, to stop musket and cannonballs. The walls rose 14 feet high from the bottom of the ditch. You might have flinched at the menacing ring of abatis sharpened tree branches around the fort, which were intended to hinder the enemy's approach. So this up here says the same exact thing it said down there. Anyway, we can look out. So over here, it says May 28th through June 1st, 1781. First parallel. After several days of digging an approach trench to get to this point, the first parallel was established. In siege warfare, a series of trenches that face the enemy's defenses are called parallels. The first parallel established a secure position from which General Greene's men could advance. The trenches were dug mostly under the cover of darkness and involved back-breaking labor. And this says, stand in a revolutionary soldier's footprints. I think my foot might be bigger than theirs. And then we got this. Hey, this one says June 1st, 1781, the artillery. Once a parallel was dug, troops could move artillery forward and place cannon in position to batter the enemy garrison. Greens, 6-pounders, guns firing 6-pound cannonballs, were placed on wooden platforms that sat on earthen fortifications about 20 feet high and allowed artillerists to fire directly into the Star Fort. These guns were manned by specially trained crews. This one says June 2nd, 1781, approach trench. Not a man could shoot his head, but what he was immediately shot down. That was General Nathaniel Greene. Approach trenches called saps, connected one parallel to the next. These angled ditches allowed troops to move toward the fort without taking direct fire from the enemy. Sappers or laborers who dug the trenches broke through the hard red soil, sometimes with only candlelight to guide them. Dangerous musket volleys often cost them their lives. So this is June 3rd, 1781, second parallel. By June 3rd, the sappers had finished the approach trench and established a second parallel. Now that he was in position to attack Kruger's stronghold, Greene, in keeping with the etiquette of siege warfare, I don't know why I say warfare, made a formal demand for the loyalists' surrender, but Kruger saw no need to comply with Greene's demand. The loyalists' casualties so far were light, and they had enough food stored away for another month. This is interesting how they got this laid out. I feel like we're on the yellow brick road. It's twisting and turning. This is June 6, 1781, second approach trench. Our approaches are going on, but slowly owing to the want of men to dig. General Nathaniel Greene. Early in the siege, Greene set up a rotation to relieve the exhausted sappers. One team dug while another returned to camp to fashion gabions, huge baskets filled with earth, or gather wood for fascines, large bundles of sticks and branches, to fortify trench walls. June 13th, 1781, the Rifle Tower. In a single night, June 13th, a 30-foot tower was made of interlocking logs, was erected under Kazoko's supervision. From the wooden platform, marksmen could aim down into the fort. The loyalists responded to this threat by making the walls nearby, well, no, not nearby, but nearly 3 foot higher with sandbags. The loyalists tried unsuccessfully to burn down the tower by firing heated cannonballs. So now we're approaching the mine entry site. And it says, begun June 9th, 1781, the mine. We shall be in the ditch of the enemy works by tomorrow night or early morning, and the powder is wanting to blow up the works. I beg you will send the powder the moment this reaches you. And that was General Nathaniel Greene to General Andrew Pickens, June 11th, 1781. Now that the Patriots were in a striking distance of the fort walls, Kazoku decided to use another classic siege tactic, mine. The plan was simple. Gunpowder packed in the mine's primary tunnel would be detonated, causing a breach which would allow Greene's men to rush into the fort from nearby approach trenches. Using picks and shovels to carve out the hard earth, laborers began to dig the main shaft on June 9th. Progress in the late spring heat and under constant loyalist fire was painfully slow. The Star Fort siege ended before Guzuko's mine could prove its worth. Learning that the Loyalists were getting reinforcements, Greene called off the effort and digging stopped short of the fort's ditch. The cone-shaped earthen passage with no beams or supports runs 125 feet from end to end and is a unique example of Revolutionary War era mine construction. The mine is one of the few remaining earthworks of the Revolutionary War. It is not accessible to visitors. So that's how they would have looked down there. And apparently this is how it would look if you could see it. So June 18th, 1781, the Forlorn Hope. Having established a third parallel and dug a mine, the Patriot troops were exhausted. Promised reinforcements from the Virginia militia failed to arrive. A frustrated Greene wrote to Congress, "Our poor fellows are worn out with fatigue, being constantly on duty every other day and sometimes every day." Circumstances forced Greene to make a difficult choice. News arrived that Lord Rawdon's 2,000 troops were headed to 96 to relieve Kruger. The construction of the siege works did not go as quickly as Greene had hoped. He was not yet in a position to breach the Star Fort, and his tired troops would be no match for Rawdon's. Spurred by his officers and men to storm the fort before Rawdon's arrival, rather than give up the siege, a reluctant Greene agreed to the assault. 50 men volunteered to lead the charge. This brave group, called the Forlorn Hope, surged from the trenches at noon on June 18, 1781. Armed with axes, these patriots tried to cut through the outer defenses along the fort perimeter so that soldiers following with hooks could pull down the sandbags and breach the walls. They were quickly pinned in the ditch around the Loyalist earthwork, caught in the crossfire by marksmen in the star-shaped fort, and surprised by 60 Loyalists who ran out the fort entrance and came at them from each side. Of the 50 Patriots assaulting the Star Fort, 30 were killed or wounded. And it says, "I have only to lament that such brave men fell in such an unsuccessful attempt." And that was General Nathaniel Greene. It's like Mom has discovered a nice place to sit underneath a tree. And that's those creatures that we're hearing so much. Says 1781, the Star Fort, heart of Loyalist defense, keeping possession of the back country is to utmost importance. Indeed, the success of the war in the Southern District depends totally upon it. And that's Lord Cornwallis to Lieutenant Colonel Kruger, August 5th, 1780. On assuming command of 96 in 1780, Lieutenant Colonel Kruger set out to fortify the town in the event of a Patriot attack. The Star Fort was the center of his defense and today offers a rare view of original British military field fortifications from the 1700s. It is one of the best preserved Revolutionary War earthworks in the nation. Imagine the high walls now eroded, steep outer ditch, and protruding faces or sharpened stakes driven into the ramparts walls of the fort that rose from the Patriot huddled in the trenches. The eight-pointed Star Fort was erected by slaves who struggled along with British soldiers to fashion it from the heavy red soil. To our eyes, the interior hardly seems like an adequate space for 200 Loyalists and their artillery, trapped here during the weeks of 1781 siege. In the hot South Carolina spring, with limited provisions and difficult access to water, the Loyalists within must have questioned their survival. Notice the ridge in the center. It is a traverse or fallback position in case the Patriots breach the walls. The ingenious design of the Star Fort permitted soldiers to fire from its many angles. Attackers from any direction were immediately caught in the crossfire. This defense provided fatal to many of the Forlorn Hope during Greene's final assault on June 18th. It says, begun June 12, 1781, the well. Water was critical to the survival of the men confined to the Star Fort, but the town's only water source, Spring Branch, lay well beyond its walls and within range of Patriot fire. Kruger hoped to remedy this dire situation by digging a well inside the fort, but at 25 feet, no water was found and the effort was abandoned. It's probably pretty impressive if you can see it from the sky with the star shape. So the sign says that was a communication trench. And this says 1781 covered way. The trench that ran here from the fort to the stockade town was not actually covered, but was used for cover. It was the route for official couriers, loyalists, relief troops, and slaves who risked Patriot fire to bring water from Spring Branch to the Star Fort. With walls only 3 feet high, they had to crouch low to get through the passage unharmed. Here this says 1775, 96, a colonial center in a time of change. The convergence of roads at 96 ensured its success as a hub of commerce, center for law and order, and haven for settlers in colonial times. In 1775, the village had a dozen dwellings, a jail, and most importantly, a courthouse, making it a seat of power in the area. Residents included blacksmiths, coopers, carpenters, field hands, and slaves. While the 1775 population is not known, a record shows 79 males living here by 1776. American colonists, recent immigrants from Europe, and slaves were among the residents. Cherokee traded here. The land was cleared for crops and animals grazed freely. Water from nearby Spring Branch was plentiful. It was remote and often dangerous in the surrounding wilderness, but inhabitants of 96 achieved a fragile peace in the backcountry. That was changed with the Revolutionary War. In Charleston, Patriot supporters formed an independent government, and on September 15, 1775, the royal governor of the South Carolina colony fled to a British warship in Charleston Harbor, leaving the colony in the hands of the Americans. Confused and concerned by the events, backcountry residents split between those remaining loyal to the king and those siding with the Patriots. In 96, William Henry Drayton, a representative from the new government, successfully converted the townspeople to the Patriot cause, fortified the jail, and sent militias out to contain the loyalist threat. But the town was too small to accommodate the garrison, and Williamson's fort was built nearby. So as you can see, this would have been a beautiful place. That over there is the northwest village corner. So that over there was the northeast village corner. And we had to get close enough so I could see the sign because, you know, I'm extremely nearsighted. So anyway, I was like, is it northeast, North Carolina? I can't see. So anyway, it's northwest. And that's northeast. That is true. Mom pointed out that the things on the tree look like the geckos. Geckos. That's rather cute.
Didn't think you were going to see something red to see in here.
I know.
Hey, you guys, those things right there.
Says that was the historic Whitehall Road. And this says, woman and child, as many as 100 loyalist families took refuge in the town in 96 during the 1781 siege. They had to suffer the same hardships and diseases as the loyalist soldiers. After the battle, many families followed the British Army to Charleston, never to return to 96.
Okay. You guys do.
So over here we have the sign, which lets you know in what direction you need to head. So Charlestown was that way, Kiwi's that way, Island Ford is that way, and Augusta is that way. So, in the question of which way do we go, there's your sign. Mom says she's going to follow the road. An important thing, anywhere you go, stay on the paved path. And this is July 1781. Why did the British burn 96? The quiet field before you was the site of the once thriving 1700s town of 96. In 1781, it had about a dozen homes, a courthouse, and a jail. When Lieutenant Colonel Kruger arrived in 1780, he fortified it against attack. One visitor observed its houses, which were entirely of wood, were compromised with a stockade. The commandant immediately set the garrison, both officers and men, to work to throw up a bank parapet high around the stockade and to strengthen it with a base. During the siege of 1781, many loyalist families from the back country, fleeing from Greene's advancing Patriot army, took refuge in the fortified town. Packed into the stockade village, already filled with Kruger's troops and sick or wounded soldiers carried out from the Star Fort, these refugees lived in constant fear of Patriot gunfire and dwindling food and water supplies. After the Patriots' defeat, Kruger was ordered to evacuate the town. The British command decided that 96 was too far from Charleston, too deep in hostile territory to be of further value to their cause. So in 1781, July, Kruger's men, with loyalist families in tow, abandoned the village and burned it to the ground, denying Patriots further use of the site. So over here, that way, would be the historic Charleston Road. And it says Goldie Trail in Charleston Road. The Goldie Trail is a 1.5 nature trail path that takes you through the woods and into a lesser known but historically significant part of the park. The route passes the presumed location of Robert Goody's trading post, established in 1751, and the archaeological remains of Fort 96. It also leads you into an unmarked cemetery, where body-length depressions in the earth and rough stone markers indicate the final resting place of about 50 unnamed people, perhaps from the colonial era. The Old Charleston Road intersects this trail, one of the oldest Indian trails in Upper South Carolina, and later a major colonial route between the town and the coast. It is sunken from age and use. Walking the Goody Trail allows you to see nature as the Indians and the first settlers did, and conveys a sense of what life was like here in the 1700s. We got Cherokee attacks of 1760. In 1759 and 1760, Cherokee raids threatened the settlers of 96. Much of the violence was generated by a larger conflict between France and England known as the French and Indian War. In late 1759, Royal Governor William Henry Littleton arrived here with militia occupied Goody's trading post and converted it into a fort to protect local settlers. The fort was attacked twice by the Cherokee on February 3rd and March 3rd, 1760. In the March attack, 250 Cherokee warriors besieged the fort for 36 hours, but the garrison held strong. And here's some things you might see along the trail if you would like to walk it. That's a no for me today anyway, but pretty sure that it's rather pretty back there. It just takes you back in time. So this would have been the southwest village corner right here. And that back there is the jail site. So this says 1773, law and order in the Carolina backcountry, the jail and the courthouse. The 96 jail stood on this site, and the courthouse was about 100 yards from it, near the Charleston Road. After the Revolutionary War, the jail fell into disrepair, and its bricks were reused for other purposes. But from 1772, when it was completed through the siege of 1781, the jail and nearby courthouse elevated this frontier town status from a remote wilderness outpost to a place of law, order, and civilization. Unlike colonial South Carolina's coastal communities, the early backcountry settlements were sparsely populated and had virtually no law enforcement. With the courts far away in Charleston, a vigilante group called Regulators emerged. 96 was the center for the Regulator movement. By 1767, there were about 4,000 regulators whose self-appointed duties included tracking down bandits, punishing immoral women, and expelling vagrants. The regulatory movement was replaced by a circuit court system in 1769, and by the time the courthouse was built, a judge from Charleston came twice a year, in April and November, to hear cases and impose sentences. The buildings were also an important part of the town's defenses during the Revolutionary War. So the courthouse would have been over there.
I should stay up here.
I think I'm thinking that right there's what it's saying steep.
Huh?
There's what it's saying steep. Must be the last final push, because we can see buildings. This says Spring Branch. A plentiful water source was essential for the colonial residents of 96 and for both Patriot and Loyalist troops garrisoned here during the Revolutionary War. The water surely flowed more freely in colonial times. During the sweltering months of the Star Fort siege of 1781, access to the spring was cut off by Patriot guards, causing panic among Loyalist troops and civilians. So that over there, that cutout, that would have been, it appears to be a woman carrying buckets to go get water out of the stream. I'm going to talk some more about the Cherokee Path Trail. So while we got a moment, just in case you wonder why I read all the signs, just in case anybody cannot see very well, you know, everybody always tells you to pause and watch. I read them so the people that do have poor vision or might happen to be blind know what I'm looking at. So that's the explanation of why I stop and read everything. Because just in case you don't know, I do know people that do have severely bad vision, so I really do it for them. It says November 18th through 21st, 1775, the American Revolution comes to the South. 6 years before the Star Fort siege, there was Williamson's Fort. You're standing at the site of the first Southern land battles of the Revolutionary War. The men fighting here were all Americans. The Loyalists supported British rule. The Patriots wanted independence from the Crown. The location of 96 at the junction of several major routes between the interior backcountry and the coast made it a strategic post during the American Revolution. And the battle here in 1775 was precipitated by Loyalists who seized a shipment of gunpowder intended as a gift of friendship from the new Provincial Congress to the Cherokee Indians. In response to this hostile act, Patriot Major Andrew Williamson mustered 500 troops at 96 and prepared to meet the enemy. His men built a makeshift fort in this field. The simple square structure was made of fence rails, baled hay, and beef hides, and enclosed a barn and outbuildings. On November 19, 1775, Loyalist commanders Patrick Cunningham and Major Joseph Robinson arrived with 2,000 men. Though greatly outnumbered, the Patriots in the fort would not surrender. Several days of fighting followed, leaving several wounded on both sides and one Patriot dead. James Birmingham was the first Patriot killed in the South in the American Revolution. A Loyalist officer, Captain Looper, also died. Days later, a truce was arranged. The fort you see now is not an original structure, but a partial reconstruction of the 1781 stockade fort. So that would be that up there. So Mom made it up the hill, so I got to make it up the hill. I might start huffing and puffing. Tell me about it. You know, I don't do steep. It's like, you can do it. You can do it. Be like the little engine. I think I can. Jesus. Whew. I made it. So it says June 12th, 1781, Light Horse Harry Lee takes the stockade fort. Here we're standing in a partial reconstruction of the stockade fort as it appeared in 1781. Archaeologists have identified remnants, see the outlines of log buildings that existed here. An elevated firing step called a banquette was located at the base of the palisade wall. Step up to the banquette before you and peer through the vertical wooden posts. And it says this is the view Loyalist soldiers had as they stood guard over the town of 96. So in June 1781, while General Greene's tired troops laid siege to the Star Fort on the north side of town, Patriot Lieutenant Colonel Henry Light Horse Harry Lee and his Continental troops arrived here on the west side of 96 to lend support. Accompanying Lee was Brigadier General Andrew Pickens, commanding 400 South Carolina militiamen. Lieutenant Colonel Lee's mission was to capture the Loyalist stronghold for the Patriots. His initial attempt did not succeed. At noon on June 18th, as part of Greene's final assault on the Star Fort, Lee's men attacked here again. This time they were easily reached the stockade walls, but their success was short-lived. Greene's failure to take the Star Fort forced all Patriot troops to make a swift exit from 96 before British reinforcements arrived. Oh, I know. I think I got in my exercise on that last hill. That took me out. Not really, but they did say it was steep, so I have to agree with them on that. So this is sacred to the memory of James Birmingham, volunteer Long Cane militia, killed at this site in the Battle of November 19th through 21st, 1775, the first South Carolinian to give his life in the cause of freedom. And that was erected by the American Legion Star Fort Post 103, 96, South Carolina, November 19th, 1975. And this says, Monument to James Birmingham. This stone honors James Birmingham, the first South Carolinian to lose his life for freedom during the Revolutionary War. Birmingham, a member of the Long Canes militia, received his fatal wound from a Loyalist musket ball. He fought under the command of Major Andrew Williamson at 96 in November 1775 in the first Revolutionary War land engagement in the South. I like these bridges. They're nice. And now we know that that represents old roads there. This says 1783 to 1850. The lost town of Cambridge. After the Revolution, the American government confiscated land that belonged to prominent Loyalists. You are standing on such tract and it became the site of a new town of 96 in 1783. The old town near the Star Fort never rebounded from its occupation by the Loyalists, who left the village in ruins after the siege of 1781. In 1785, the state legislature voted to establish a College of Cambridge here, and in 1787 the town was officially renamed Cambridge. By the early 1800s, Cambridge was already beginning to decline. In 1806, one resident described the village as nothing more than a snug little village of 15 or 20 houses and stores on top of a small hill. The village has 7 stores and 3 taverns. Its appearance is not at all flourishing. About 200 people lived in the town. By about 1850, it had almost disappeared, and today there is no visible trace of a town. Why did Cambridge disappear? There were several factors. In the 1800s, the judicial seat was moved to Abbeville, and when railroads came to this region in the 1850s, Cambridge was not on the main line. The closest depot was 2 miles north, and the modern town of 96 grew along the section of the track which connected the cities of Columbia and Greenville. Isolated residents moved away from Cambridge. The courthouse was raised in 1856, and the post office closed in 1860. The only attraction left standing was the Star Fort from the Revolutionary War era. There are plenty of picnic tables out here if you want to have a picnic while you're here. And they've got the recycling bins and the trash containers. This says Logan Log House. The Logan Log House was found enclosed in this house in Greenwood, South Carolina. Photo from the Index Journal, December 8th, 1966. Built by Andrew Logan in the late 1700s, this well-preserved example of a log house of that time was discovered in nearby Greenwood. The historic structure had been hidden under siding and obscured by alterations from a much later period. Realizing its value as an extraordinary artifact, the Star Fort Historic Commission, which managed the site before the National Park Service, had it moved here in 1968. The two-story house of logs and chicken mortar is typical of colonial era backcountry buildings. A fireplace would have been used for heat and cooking. Furniture would have been scant and simple, and animals might have been quartered in a side yard pen. The Logan house is now used for living history programs. You must have a fire in here. It smells just like a campfire. I like houses like that. I did not notice that a while ago, but that's pretty cool. They got 96 down there in the fort, in the bricks up here at the front. And the good thing about it being a 96 like that, you can look at it from either direction and it looks exactly the same. I think I like it better from this direction though, because you get the house in the background. Okay, we're going to go ahead and wrap up the 96 National Historic Site before we leave. How'd you like it, Mom?
It was pretty interesting.
I'm just glad, I don't know how you feel about this, but I'm glad we did not decide to do it last year. I think whenever I had the wild idea that we wanted to come here, whenever we came to see the topiaries in Greenwood in June, I think we would have died as hot as it was that day.
It was cool enough this morning.
Yes, 68 degrees outside right now, so that's not bad at all. I enjoyed it. I do wish though that they had like some kind of platform, maybe closer to the woods over there, so you could go up and see the design of the fort from above, you know?
Well, they might for years.
Probably not. I mean, it's been open since 1976, so it's soon be 50 years old, so I don't think they will have nothing by now. But this was the brochure. This says the village then and now, and it shows different things right there from 1815, but anyway, 1815, 1810. They got some bone-handled knife and fork. The cook, some bone buttons. And as you can tell, I referenced this quite a few times today. Sorry, looking a little ragged, but that's the whole thing right there. It tells you everything. And I think I read every sign out there almost. I think there was only maybe a couple of I did not 100% get. Anyway, it was very interesting. We came here a few years ago. We only went over to the house over there. We didn't go into the fort section. But I enjoyed it.
That was the celebration, wasn't it?
That's whenever the Park Service turned 100 years old. Did they have cupcakes that day we came? I think they did.
If they didn't have cupcake, they had cooks.
I think they had cupcakes here, and they had a cake at Congaree, because I think we went to 2 places that day. They had the 100th birthday.
And Congaree.
Yep. So anyway, hope you enjoyed this little, well, it wasn't a little, but the walk around 96 in the Star Fort. If you like history. So, I like history. And the only thing that was really steep was that last hill, going up to that other fort that was really straight.
The one went up when we first started, and the last one we came up.
Yeah. But I'm glad there wasn't a lot of people here to begin with. Whenever I first started doing the video, I think 2 people passed us, and then we didn't see anybody else for a long time until we got over there near the Charleston Road, right? So pretty much had a place to ourselves. And it's open from sunrise to sunset daily. It might be closed some days out there, probably national holidays or something, but you can Google it if you don't know. And then the visitor center is open, I think, Wednesday through Sunday, and they're closed Monday and Tuesday, I believe. But we didn't go in there, so I didn't spend any money. So anyway, that's going to do it for this one. We hope you enjoy. We'll see you somewhere else. So toodaloo.
Subscribe.
And please do subscribe. So see you later. Bye.